Fluorescent lights hummed, a sterile counterpoint to the low murmur of conversation that rippled through the R&D department. Jinxie clutched her worn handbag, its leather cool against her clammy palms. The air, thick with the antiseptic tang of chemicals and the faint floral undercurrent of someone's perfume, felt heavy, oppressive. Each stainless steel workstation, gleaming under the artificial light, seemed to mock her with its pristine order, a stark contrast to the chaos churning within her. Director Nangong, a woman whose sharp features and tailored suit spoke of efficiency and control, stood at the head of a long, polished table. Her voice, crisp and clear, cut through the ambient noise. From today onwards, we have a new colleague in the R&D department. Let's welcome Miss Jinxie. A smattering of applause, polite yet lacking genuine warmth, followed. Jinxie managed a shaky smile, feeling the weight of curious gazes settle upon her. Her reflection in the polished surface of the table seemed small, insignificant, swallowed by the vastness of the room. Don't let them see you're nervous, she told herself, her stomach twisting into a tight knot. Just act like you belong. Director Nangong gestured towards an empty workstation, its surface bare except for a computer monitor and a telephone. Miss Jinxie will be working alongside Dr. Li on the new serum formulation. Her gaze flickered back to Jinxie, a subtle shift in her expression that Jinxie couldn't quite decipher. Missy has never done any related job before. Please help her to get used to it as soon as possible. The words, though seemingly innocuous, hung in the air, laced with a thinly veiled condescension. Jinxie's cheeks flushed. Never done any related job before. The phrase echoed in her mind, a stark reminder of her lack of experience. She had landed this position, not through years of dedicated study or a string of impressive internships, but through a chance encounter, a twist of fate that still felt surreal. She swallowed, forcing down the rising tide of self-doubt. She would prove them wrong. She had to. As Jinxie made her way to her assigned workstation, the whispers began, soft at first, like the rustling of dry leaves, then growing bolder, sharper. She directly joined the R&D department without any working experience. What kind of back door did she take? The words, though not directed at her, stung. Jinxie's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. She could feel the blood rushing to her ears, the heat radiating from her face. Ignore them, she willed herself. Focus on the task at hand. Dr. Li, a man with kind eyes and a receding hairline, offered a hesitant smile. He handed her a thick file, its pages filled with complex chemical formulas and technical jargon. This is the current formulation for the serum. Director Nangong wants you to review it and propose any improvements you can think of by the end of the week. Jinxie's heart sank. A week? The sheer volume of information within the file seemed overwhelming. She barely understood half the terms used. How am I supposed to improve something I don't even comprehend? Later that day, huddled in a quiet corner of the cafeteria with her friend Ainen, Jinxie recounted the morning's events, her voice laced with frustration. It's like they're setting me up to fail, she muttered, picking at her barely touched salad. Ainen, ever the pragmatist, offered a different perspective. Maybe they just want to see what you're capable of. Don't let their doubts get to you. Prove them wrong. Jinxie sighed, her gaze drifting towards the large window overlooking the city. The sprawling metropolis stretched before her, a concrete jungle teeming with life, with possibilities. Prove them wrong. The words echoed in her mind, a spark of defiance igniting within her. As the week progressed, Jinxie immersed herself in the research, spending long hours poring over scientific journals and textbooks, her mind slowly beginning to unravel the complex web of chemical interactions. She discovered a subtle flaw in the existing serum formulation, a seemingly insignificant detail that had been overlooked by the experienced researchers. With a growing sense of confidence, she proposed a modification, a simple yet elegant solution that could potentially enhance the serum's efficacy. The presentation of her findings to Director Nangong and Mr. Gu, the enigmatic CEO of the company, was a nerve-wracking experience. Mr. Gu, a man whose presence commanded attention, listened intently, his dark eyes seemingly piercing through her. Director Nangong, however, remained impassive, her expression unreadable. The subsequent events unfolded with a dizzying rapidity. Director Nangong, unable to reconcile her own insecurities with Jinxie's unexpected success, tendered her resignation. Rumors swirled through the company, whispers of jealousy, of power plays, of Mr. Gu's rumored favoritism towards Jinxie. Miss He, a woman whose name was often linked with Mr. Gu's, watched from the sidelines, her expression a mixture of concern and amusement. The dynamics within the company were shifting, the lines between professional and personal blurring, and Jinxie, caught in the crosscurrents, found herself navigating a treacherous landscape of unspoken desires and hidden agendas. The confrontation in Mr. Gu's office, the tension crackling in the air, felt like a turning point, a precipice from which there was no turning back. The fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous tune, a stark contrast to the frantic buzzing in Jinxie's head. The sleek, minimalist office, so impressive that morning, now felt like a sterile cage. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, paralyzed. Market requirements? It sounded like something from another planet, and the dense document on her screen might as well have been written in alien script. She glanced around the room. Her colleagues were hunched over their computers, a symphony of clicking keys and hushed phone calls. Each seemed cocooned in their own world, an impenetrable bubble of expertise. Jinxie's stomach churned. She had to ask for help. Swallowing hard, she turned to the woman closest to her, a sharp-faced woman whose name she couldn't quite recall. "Excuse me," Jinxie began, her voice thinner than she intended, "I've never done the market requirements before. Can someone teach me?" The woman's eyes flicked up, a brief, dismissive scan before returning to her screen. "Jinxie, everyone has their own job. I'm afraid it's inappropriate to find someone specially for you." A curt nod, final as a slammed door. Jinxie's cheeks flushed hot. Inappropriate? Was it a crime to be new? To not instinctively know the arcane workings of this department? She could feel her carefully constructed composure crumbling, replaced by a wave of frustration. "Don't let them see you sweat," she told herself fiercely, but the tightness in her chest betrayed her. She swiveled back to her computer, the glow of the screen a harsh reflection in her wide eyes. The document swam before her, the technical jargon blurring into a meaningless jumble. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her focus. She had to try, at least. Even if it was futile, even if she was destined to fail, she had to try. Across the room, Director Nangong watched the scene unfold, her lips pressed into a thin line. Jinxie's struggles, her obvious discomfort, sparked a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. Satisfaction at the confirmation of her own suspicions the girl was clearly out of her depth. But the unease that was harder to define. Was it a flicker of empathy? Or perhaps the unsettling realization that Mr. Gu's interest in this newcomer was more than just professional curiosity? She pushed the thought away, focusing on the reports in front of her. No, it was simply annoyance. Annoyance at the disruption, at the extra attention Jinxie seemed to command. Later that afternoon, as the shadows lengthened across the office floor, Director Nangong approached Jinxie's desk. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished concrete, a sound that echoed the tension in Jinxie's chest. "Jinxie," she said, her voice crisp and businesslike, "I need you to compile a comprehensive analysis of the last quarter's consumer feedback on the luminous line. Cross-reference it with the projected market trends for the next fiscal year and prepare a detailed proposal for product adjustments." She placed a thick stack of documents on Jinxie's already cluttered desk. The paper felt heavy, a physical manifestation of the weight settling on Jinxie's shoulders. Send it to the production department before 4 p.m. Director Nangong's gaze was unwavering, almost challenging. Jinxie stared at the mountain of paperwork, her mind reeling. Within today, she managed, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, Director Nangong replied, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. Work hard and pull an all-nighter. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking a triumphant rhythm against the floor. Jinxie's breath hitched. An all-nighter? It was impossible. She hadn't even begun to understand the basic tasks, let alone tackle a project of this magnitude. A wave of despair washed over her, threatening to drown her in its icy grip. This is it, she thought, this is how it ends. Day 1. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 2:30 p.m. less than 2 hours. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. The office lights buzzed relentlessly, the air thick with the unspoken tension. Jinxie's colleagues continued their work, seemingly oblivious to her predicament. Or perhaps, she thought darkly, they were simply enjoying the spectacle. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like a specimen under a microscope. Her initial nervousness had morphed into a simmering anger. This wasn't just about incompetence, this was about something else. Something darker, more deliberate. She could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon her, judging, scrutinizing. The pressure was suffocating, a tangible force pressing down on her. Anan, her friend from HR, walked by, her eyes full of concern. Jinxie, are you okay? She whispered. You look pale. Jinxie managed a weak smile. Just a bit overwhelmed, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Nangong gave you the luminous project? Anan's eyes widened in disbelief. That's insane. It usually takes a team of 3 a week to complete that. She's setting you up to fail. Jinxie's heart sank. Confirmation. It wasn't just her imagination. This was deliberate. A cold, calculated move designed to break her. But why? What had she done to deserve this? The questions swirled in her mind, adding to the growing sense of unease. She looked at the mountain of paperwork on her desk, a symbol of the impossible task ahead. A wave of defiance surged through her. She wouldn't let them win. She wouldn't let them break her. She would fight. She would find a way to survive this, even if it meant pulling an all-nighter. Even if it meant facing the hostility, the pressure, the impossible odds. She would fight. For herself. For her future. For the flicker of hope that still burned within her, refusing to be extinguished. The fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous tune, a soundtrack to the quiet desperation of a late Friday afternoon. Jinxie's fingers hovered over the keyboard, each keystroke a tiny hammer blow against the wall of her mounting anxiety. The air in the R&D department, normally thick with the sterile scent of chemicals and ambition, now carried a strange undercurrent of anticipation, a prickling awareness that something was about to shift. She glanced at the clock. 4:57 p.m. 3 minutes. 3 minutes until her deadline, and the report, the very first testament to her competence in this daunting new world, was still incomplete. Her stomach twisted. Had she made a mistake accepting this job? The interview had been a blur, a whirlwind of technical jargon and veiled assessments. Mr. Gu, the CEO, with his enigmatic smile and penetrating gaze, had seemed more interested in her reaction to stress than her actual qualifications. Now, staring at the blinking cursor, she felt the weight of that scrutiny bearing down on her. A ripple of movement at the lab's entrance drew her attention. Mr. Gu, impeccably dressed as always, strode in, a paper bag swinging from his hand. His presence radiated an unsettling energy, a mixture of charm and authority that made the hairs on Jinxie's arms stand on end. He stopped at Director Nangong's desk, his smile softening into something that, to Jinxie's unervingly perceptive eye, seemed almost tender. "I remembered you mentioned craving pho this week," he said, his voice a low murmur that carried across the room. "Hope you enjoy." Director Nangong, normally a whirlwind of brisk efficiency, seemed momentarily flustered. A delicate blush crept up her neck, staining the sharp angles of her jawline. "Mr. Gu, you shouldn't have," she stammered, but her eyes, Jinxie noticed, sparkled with a pleasure she hadn't seen there before. Jinxie swallowed hard, the lump in her throat growing. She forced her gaze back to the screen, the lines of data blurring before her eyes. The casual gesture, the shared intimacy of a remembered preference, hung heavy in the air, a tangible testament to a connection that Jinxie couldn't quite decipher. Was it professional courtesy? Something more? The uncertainty gnawed at her, a disquieting echo of her own precarious position within the company. A hushed whisper, close to her ear, startled her. "Did you know Mr. Gu especially bought lunch for Director Nang today?" It was Xiao Mei, the lab assistant, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and malice. "He still remembers her preference. He's so thoughtful, isn't he?" The seemingly innocuous comment landed like a blow to Jinxie's gut. Thoughtful. The word echoed in her mind, laced with a bitter irony. Was it thoughtfulness, or something else entirely? A subtle display of power? A calculated move in a game she didn't understand? I wouldn't know," Jinxie mumbled, her voice barely audible. She felt a strange mixture of resentment and fascination swirling within her. Resentment at the blatant favoritism, the unspoken hierarchy that seemed to permeate the very air she breathed. Fascination with the complex web of relationships that lay beneath the surface of corporate civility. Just then, Mr. Gu turned, his gaze sweeping across the room. It landed on Jinxie, and his smile widened, a subtle shift in its curvature that sent a shiver down her spine. "Jinxie," he said, his voice carrying an undercurrent of amusement, "how's that report coming along?" Jinxie's heart hammered against her ribs. She felt a flush rising in her cheeks, a betraying heat that she desperately tried to suppress. "Almost finished, sir," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Good," he replied, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. "I'm looking forward to seeing it." He turned to leave, pausing at the door. "Just taking a walk," he said, addressing no one in particular, his gaze fixed on the hallway beyond. But Jinxie felt a strange pull, a sense that those words, that seemingly casual statement, held a hidden meaning, a message meant only for her. As the sound of his footsteps faded, the tension in the room seemed to dissipate, replaced by a wave of hushed whispers and speculative glances. Jinxie, however, felt more on edge than ever. Mr. Gu's visit, his seemingly innocuous gestures, had thrown her off balance, leaving her with a lingering sense of unease. She glanced at Director Nangong, who was now meticulously arranging the contents of the paper bag, her expression a mask of serene composure. But Jinxie saw the slight tremor in her hands, the almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. She was affected too, Jinxie realized, by the subtle currents of power and desire that flowed beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary workplace. Finally, with a deep breath, Jinxie turned back to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. 5 minutes past the deadline. But she couldn't afford to dwell on it. She had to finish the report, to prove her worth, to navigate this treacherous new landscape with a semblance of grace and competence. As she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, observed, assessed. And not just by her colleagues, but by the enigmatic Mr. Gu, whose presence, even in absence, seemed to permeate every corner of the R&D department. The fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous tune, casting a sterile glow over Director Nangong's meticulously organized office. Outside, the city lights twinkled, a blurred tapestry viewed through the large glass window, a stark contrast to the sterile, almost clinical environment within. Jinxie shifted from foot to foot, the weight of the portfolio clutched in her hands suddenly feeling immense. It wasn't just the weight of the paper, it was the weight of expectation, the weight of her future, the weight of proving herself in a world that seemed determined to keep her out. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. The scent of Director Nangong's perfume, sharp and floral, hung in the air, an almost tangible presence. It was a scent Jinxie associated with power, with competence, with everything she aspired to be. Director Nangong, Jinxie began, her voice a little higher than she intended, my design draft is ready. Could you please provide me with some advice? The words hung in the air, fragile and tentative. She willed herself to meet the director's gaze, to project an image of confidence she didn't quite feel. A small, self-deprecating smile touched her lips. Just act natural, Jinxie. You've done your best. Don't let them see how scared you are. Director Nangong's eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned her from head to toe, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. Jinxie felt her stomach tighten. Had she done something wrong? Was her outfit inappropriate? Was it a mistake to come so late? 1,000 tiny anxieties gnawed at her. She held her breath, waiting for the verdict. Very good, Director Nangong said finally, her voice smooth, almost too smooth. I like it. Relief washed over Jinxie, a wave of warmth spreading through her chest. I did it. She likes it. But even as the thought formed, a prickle of unease remained. There was something in Director Nangong's tone, a subtle inflection that Jinxie couldn't quite place. Jinxie carefully laid the portfolio on the pristine glass desktop, the cool surface a stark contrast to the heat radiating from her palms. This is my first design, she explained, her voice gaining a little more confidence. There are many things I don't understand. I would appreciate any guidance you can offer. Her fingers fidgeted with the clasp of her bag. She hoped her nervousness didn't show. Director Nangong opened the portfolio, her long, manicured fingers turning the pages with a practiced grace. Jinxie watched her, every muscle tense, every nerve ending on high alert. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the rustle of paper and the faint hum of the air conditioning. Jinxie could feel the sweat beginning to bead on her forehead. The air in the room suddenly felt thick, suffocating. Why is she taking so long? Is it really that bad? Director Nangong paused, her gaze fixed on one particular sketch. Jinxie held her breath. It was her favorite, the one she'd poured the most time and effort into. A complex blend of colors and textures, a delicate balance of innovation and tradition. Please, let her like it. It's fine, Director Nangong said at last, her voice carefully neutral. It's good enough. She closed the portfolio, the sharp snap of the clasp echoing in the quiet office. It just needs some slight adjustments. Jinxie's shoulders slumped slightly. The initial wave of relief had been replaced by a strange mix of disappointment and confusion. Good enough. Slight adjustments. The praise felt hollow, almost perfunctory. She had expected more, a more detailed critique, a more enthusiastic response. Had she misinterpreted the initial flicker of approval in Director Nangong's eyes? What kind of adjustments? Jinxie asked, trying to keep her voice even. She forced a smile. I'm eager to learn. Don't be defensive, Jinxie. This is your chance to improve. Director Nangong leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched again, taut and uncomfortable. Jinxie could feel the director's gaze on her, assessing, evaluating. What is she thinking? Why won't she just tell me? Well, Director Nangong began, her voice laced with a new, almost brittle edge. For starters, the color palette isn't conventional. She paused, as if searching for the right word. Perhaps a little too bold for our target demographic. Jinxie frowned. The color palette was one of the aspects she was most proud of. It was innovative, daring, a departure from the company's usual, predictable style. But I thought, she began, then stopped herself. Don't argue, Jinxie. Listen and learn. I thought it was fresh, she finished lamely. A thin smile played on Director Nangong's lips. Fresh, she repeated, the word dripping with irony. Perhaps. But also a little amateurish. The word hung in the air, a sharp, stinging rebuke. Jinxie felt her cheeks flush. The initial anxiety had morphed into something else, something hotter, more indignant. Amateurish? How dare she? I see, Jinxie said, her voice tight. She struggled to maintain a composed facade, to keep the rising tide of resentment from spilling over. Don't let her see how much this hurts, Jinxie. You're stronger than that. I'll revise it. Director Nangong nodded, a curt, dismissive gesture. Yes, I think that would be best. She picked up a pen and began to make notes on a pad, effectively dismissing Jinxie from her presence. The message was clear, the conversation was over. Jinxie stood there for a moment, feeling a strange mix of anger and humiliation churning inside her. Amateurish. That's all she has to say. After all the work I put into this. The weight of the portfolio in her hands now felt like lead. She wanted to argue, to defend her design, to prove her worth. But something held her back. A sense of futility, a realization that any further argument would be pointless. Director Nangong had already made up her mind. With a tight smile, Jinxie turned and walked towards the door. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their cold, impersonal glare a stark reminder of the harsh realities of the corporate world. As she reached the door, she paused, her hand on the handle. She took a deep breath, composing herself. Don't let her break you, Jinxie. Then, with a final, almost defiant glance back at Director Nangong, she stepped out into the hallway, the closing door echoing behind her like the finality of a slammed gavel. The city lights outside seemed to shimmer, a kaleidoscope of possibilities, a promise of a future beyond the confines of this sterile office. And in that moment, a flicker of defiance ignited within her. I'll show her. I'll show them all. The fluorescent lights of Goo Corporation hummed a monotonous tune, a stark contrast to the quiet chaos brewing within its walls. Night had fallen, casting long shadows across the deserted cubicles, yet the air crackled with unspoken tensions. Mr. Goo stood by the panoramic window of his office, the city lights blurring into an indistinct tapestry below. He tapped a pen against the cool glass, a rhythmic counterpoint to the turmoil in his mind. Jinxie. The name, almost childishly flippant, echoed strangely in the sterile corporate environment. He'd seen something in her, a spark of raw talent buried beneath a veneer of nervous inexperience. It was a gamble, hiring her on the spot, bypassing the usual rigorous vetting process. But his gut, honed by years of cutthroat business dealings, rarely steered him wrong. He recalled the flicker of defiance in her eyes when Nangong had challenged her, a glint of steel beneath the soft exterior. Intriguing. A soft knock broke his reverie. Nangong stood at the threshold, her face etched with a mixture of exhaustion and apprehension. Mr. Goo, she began, her voice tight with unshed tears. He gestured her in, his expression carefully neutral. Nangong, he acknowledged, his tone laced with a gentle concern that belied the steel core within. He knew what was coming. This conversation had been brewing all day, a silent storm gathering force beneath the polite facade of corporate decorum. He poured her a glass of water, the clinking of the crystal against the glass a brittle sound in the otherwise silent office. I don't understand, she finally burst out, her composure cracking under the weight of suppressed emotions. "Jinxie, she's unqualified. I don't see what you see in her." Each word was a shard of glass, sharp and brittle. Nangong's meticulous world, built on years of hard work and dedication, was suddenly tilting on its axis. The arrival of Jinxie, so abrupt and unexpected, felt like a personal affront. Mr. Gu regarded her with a mixture of sympathy and impatience. He understood her insecurities, the fear of being replaced, overshadowed. He'd seen it countless times in the corporate world, the ruthless climb to the top littered with the casualties of ambition. "Nangong," he began, his voice soft yet firm, "I value your contributions to this company. But sometimes, raw potential trumps experience." He saw the hurt flicker across her face, the unspoken accusation in her eyes. He sighed internally. This was not how he envisioned the evening unfolding. Down in the deserted lab, Jinxie hunched over a workstation, the glow of the computer screen illuminating her face. The initial thrill of the job had long since evaporated, replaced by a gnawing anxiety. The day had been a whirlwind of unfamiliar faces, complex procedures, and unspoken expectations. She felt like a small boat tossed about in a stormy sea, desperately trying to stay afloat. Her phone buzzed, a persistent reminder of the world outside these sterile walls. She glanced at the caller ID Anin. A wave of warmth washed over her, a comforting presence in the isolating coldness of the corporate world. "Hey," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Jinxie. How was your first day? Did they throw you to the wolves?" Anin's cheerful voice, crackling through the phone, was a lifeline. Jinxie let out a shaky laugh. "Pretty much. I messed up a titration, spilled coffee on Director Nangong's shoes, and almost set off the fire alarm." "Oh, honey," Anin's voice softened with concern. "Don't worry, everyone has a disastrous first day. You'll get the hang of it." Jinxie wished she could share Anin's optimism. The weight of her family's expectations, the financial burden she carried on her slender shoulders, pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. "It's not just the job," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's everything." The conversation drifted to family matters, the unspoken worries and anxieties that bound them together. Each word, each shared confidence, was a balm to Jinxie's frayed nerves. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the building, Miss He observed the unfolding drama with a detached curiosity. She had seen this pattern before, the subtle manipulations, the carefully orchestrated power plays. Mr. Gu's interest in Jinxie was more than just professional curiosity. She recognized the glint in his eyes, the same look he had once bestowed upon her. A pang of something akin to regret, or perhaps just resignation, flickered through her. She knew the game, the rules of engagement, the inevitable casualties. She just hadn't expected to be a spectator this time. Back in Mr. Gu's office, Nangong's composure finally crumbled. "I'm resigning," she announced, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Mr. Gu's expression remained impassive, but a flicker of annoyance crossed his features. This wasn't part of his plan. He needed Nangong, her expertise, her unwavering dedication. He had underestimated the depth of her insecurity, the fragility of her ego. "Nangong, reconsider," he urged, his voice laced with a persuasive charm he rarely employed. "This is an emotional reaction. You're invaluable to this company." But the dam had broken. Years of pent-up frustration, the constant pressure to perform, the unspoken fear of being replaced, had finally taken their toll. "My decision is final," she reiterated, her voice shaking but firm. She turned and walked out, leaving Mr. Gu standing alone in the silence of his office, the city lights twinkling mockingly below. He felt a prickle of unease. Things were spiraling out of control. "Jinxie," emerging from the lab, her face pale and drawn, almost collided with Miss He in the deserted hallway. "Are you all right?" Miss He asked, her voice laced with a genuine concern that surprised Jinxie. Jinxie managed a weak smile. "Just a long day." Miss He's gaze lingered on Jinxie's face, searching, assessing. "Be careful, Jinxie," she finally said, her voice low and cryptic. "Sometimes, the greatest dangers are the ones we least expect." She turned and walked away, leaving Jinxie standing alone in the echoing hallway, her mind reeling with unanswered questions. The night, already heavy with unspoken tensions, seemed to grow darker, the shadows lengthening, stretching towards her like grasping fingers. The restaurant hummed with a low, melodic buzz, a symphony of clinking glasses and hushed conversations. Jinxie sat across from Mr. Gu, the pristine white tablecloth a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling within her. The aroma of ginger and garlic drifted from the kitchen, a tantalizing scent that did little to appease her churning stomach. He had simply stated, "dinner," and she, still reeling from the day's events, had numbly agreed. Now, the weight of the day pressed down on her, a heavy cloak of exhaustion and bewilderment. "Why me?" she thought, picking at the corner of the starched napkin. "Why did Nangong react so strongly? And why did Mr. Gu even hire me in the first place?" Mr. Gu, seemingly oblivious to her inner turmoil, swirled the wine in his glass, the ruby liquid catching the light. "You handled yourself well today, Jinxie," he said, his voice smooth as polished jade. "Nangongsh can be intense." He offered a small, almost apologetic smile. Jinxie forced a smile in return, the muscles in her face stiff. "Intense? That's an understatement." "Thank you, Mr. Gu," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt hollow, a mere formality in the face of the injustice she had endured. She remembered Ainan's fierce whisper in the restroom, "Don't let them walk all over you, Jinxie." The memory sparked a flicker of defiance within her. "I've seen your designs," Mr. Gu continued, his gaze unwavering. "Very different. Fresh. Exactly what the company needs." A wave of warmth washed over Jinxie, a brief respite from the chill of uncertainty. "He saw them. He actually looked at my work." "To appreciate that, Mr. Gu," she stammered, her cheeks flushing slightly. The validation, especially coming from him, was surprisingly potent. "Don't let Nangong's resignation discourage you," he said, his eyes now holding a hint of something she couldn't quite decipher. "Concern? Perhaps. Or something else entirely. She wasn't the right fit for the direction I want to take the company." Jinxie's mind raced. "Direction? What direction? And what does that have to do with me?" The questions tumbled around in her head, a chaotic jumble of anxieties and possibilities. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "I have a feeling about you, Jinxie. I think you can bring something special to this company." His words, laced with an almost unsettling intensity, sent a shiver down her spine. She looked away, focusing on the intricate patterns woven into the tablecloth. What does he mean? Is this just about work, or is there something else going on? The unease she had felt earlier intensified, a knot tightening in her chest. She remembered Miss He's concerned look, her gentle touch on her arm. Is this how he operates? She wondered, the question a bitter taste in her mouth. "Tell me, Jinxie," Mr. Gu's voice interrupted her thoughts, "what are your thoughts on the new spring collection?" The abrupt change of subject startled her, but she welcomed the shift away from the personal. "I think it's safe," she began, choosing her words carefully. "But it lacks edge. It's missing something that would truly make it stand out." She paused, gathering her courage. "I have some ideas," actually, as she spoke, her initial nervousness melted away, replaced by a surge of passion. She described her vision for the collection, her words flowing freely, her hands gesturing animatedly. She spoke of incorporating unconventional textures, bold colors, and innovative formulas, drawing inspiration from nature and art. With each word, she felt a growing sense of purpose, a renewed confidence in her abilities. Mr. Gu listened intently, his eyes fixed on her face, a flicker of amusement playing on his lips. He occasionally interjected with a question or a comment, but for the most part, he let her speak, allowing her to fully express her ideas. "You're passionate," he said, his voice a low rumble, when she finally paused. "I like that." Jinxie felt her cheeks flush again, a mixture of pride and embarrassment warming her skin. "He's playing with me," a small voice whispered in her mind. "He knows exactly what he's doing." Despite the warning, she couldn't deny the thrill of being heard, of having her ideas recognized and appreciated. "I believe in this project," she said, her voice firm, the earlier uncertainty replaced by a steely resolve. "I know I can make it something truly special." Mr. Gu's smile widened, a flash of something predatory in his eyes. "I have no doubt you will, Jinxie," he said, his voice laced with a meaning that went beyond the professional. "I have no doubt at all." The meal continued, a delicate dance between professional discussion and unspoken tension. Jinxie found herself caught in a web of conflicting emotions, drawn to Mr. Gu's power and charisma, yet repelled by his manipulative undertones. As the evening progressed, one thing became clear: despite the chaos and uncertainty, she would not be deterred. She would prove herself, not to him, not to Nangong, but to herself. She would carve her own path in this company, regardless of the challenges that lay ahead. The thought, a small ember of defiance in the face of adversity, burned brightly within her. The night, filled with unsettling implications, had solidified her resolve. It was a quiet declaration of war, waged not with words or actions, but with the unwavering strength of her own conviction. The restaurant's soft music, the clinking glasses, all faded into the background as Jinxie stared at the flickering candle flame, a small, unwavering light in the encroaching darkness. The fluorescent lights of the R&D lab hummed, a dull counterpoint to the frantic tapping of keyboards. Jinxie stared at the complex formula on her screen, a knot tightening in her stomach. Director Nangong's resignation had left a gaping hole, a vacuum of authority that seemed to suck the very air from the room. Just days ago, she had been the nervous newcomer, fumbling with beakers and intimidated by Nangong's sharp gaze. Now, the whispers and sidelong glances of her colleagues felt different. Pity? Speculation? Or was it something colder, a hint of accusation? Did they think I had something to do with it? The thought pricked at her, an uncomfortable echo of Mr. Gu's ambiguous words of comfort after Nangong's tearful outburst. "It's not your fault," he had said, his hand resting briefly, almost too casually, on her shoulder. The warmth of his touch had lingered, a confusing contrast to the coolness in his eyes. Jinxie replayed the scene in her mind, the way Nangong's voice had cracked as she accused Mr. Gu of favoritism, of undermining her authority. The scene was a blur of accusations and denials, ending with Nangong's dramatic exit, a whirlwind of tears and crumpled resignation papers. The lab felt colder now, sterile. The scent of chemicals, once exciting and novel, now carried a metallic tang of stress. Jinxie swiveled in her chair, her gaze drifting towards the empty office at the far end of the lab. Nangong's meticulously organized desk was bare, her personal effects gone, leaving behind only the ghost of her presence. What drove her to this? Jinxie wondered, the question a nagging echo in the hollow space. Nangong's insecurity, her fierce ambition, her thinly veiled resentment, it had all been simmering beneath the surface, waiting for a catalyst. And Jinxie, unwittingly, had become that catalyst. Her phone buzzed, a message from Ainen. Coffee break? Need to de-stress. Jinxie typed a quick reply, a desperate need for a friendly face and a moment away from the oppressive atmosphere of the lab. The company cafeteria was a hive of activity, a cacophony of chatter and clattering trays. Ainen waved from a corner table, a comforting beacon in the chaos. Jinxie joined her, the warmth of the coffee cup a welcome sensation against her cold hands. "So," Ainen began, her eyes full of concern, "what's the atmosphere like up there?" "Everyone's talking about Nangong's resignation." Jinxie sighed, stirring her coffee. "It's tense. Like walking on eggshells." She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Ainen was a good friend, a confidant, but this situation felt different, laced with a complexity she couldn't quite grasp. "I still can't believe it," Ainen murmured, shaking her head. Nangong was so intense. Driven. "I always thought she'd climb the corporate ladder, not crash and burn." Jinxie thought about the brittle edge to Nangong's ambition, the way she'd micromanaged every project, every detail. It was as if her entire self-worth was tied to her position, her success. And then Jinxie had arrived, a disruption, a perceived threat. Maybe it was inevitable, she thought, a flicker of sadness mixing with the guilt. Across the cafeteria, Jinxie noticed Miss He sitting alone, a book open in front of her, but her gaze fixed on something beyond the pages. There was a melancholy about her, a quiet sadness that Jinxie had noticed before. It struck her then, the subtle connections, the invisible threads that seemed to link everyone to Mr. Gu. Nangong, Miss He, herself all caught in his orbit, their lives subtly influenced by his presence, his decisions. Later that day, Jinxie found herself summoned to Mr. Gu's office. The sleek, minimalist space, with its panoramic city view, always intimidated her. Mr. Gu was seated behind his large desk, his expression unreadable. "Jinxie," he began, his voice smooth, almost gentle. "I wanted to check in with you. How are you coping with everything?" Jinxie hesitated, her heart pounding against her ribs. Coping. The word felt inadequate, a hollow echo in the face of the turmoil she felt. Adjusting, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Gu leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I know this has been difficult," he said, his voice low and confidential. "But I have faith in you. I believe you have the potential to be a valuable asset to this company." His words, meant to be reassuring, felt strangely unsettling. There was a veiled meaning behind them, a subtext she couldn't decipher. A valuable asset? The phrase echoed in her mind, a chilling reminder of the power dynamics at play. She was a pawn in a game she didn't fully understand, a game with rules she hadn't yet learned. And Mr. Gu, with his enigmatic smile and carefully chosen words, was the master player. The following days were a blur of meetings, reports, and frantic attempts to familiarize herself with Nangong's abandoned projects. The pressure was immense, but Jinxie found a strange resilience within herself, a determination to prove herself, not just to Mr. Gu, but to herself. She worked late into the night, poring over data, experimenting with formulas, driven by a need to escape the swirling doubts and anxieties that plagued her. One evening, as she was leaving the lab, she saw Miss He standing by the elevator, her face pale and drawn. "Jinxie," Miss He said, her voice barely a whisper. "Can we talk?" Jinxie's heart sank. She had a premonition that this conversation would not be easy. They walked to a nearby coffee shop, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. "I know this is a difficult time for you," Miss He began, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of sadness and understanding. "Nangong's resignation, it was unfortunate." Jinxie nodded, her throat tight. "I just want you to know," Miss He continued, her voice trembling slightly, "that you shouldn't blame yourself. Mr. Gu can be persuasive. He has a way of manipulating situations to his advantage." Jinxie stared at her, her mind reeling. Manipulating? Was that what had happened with Nangong? Had Mr. Gu orchestrated her downfall? The thought was a sickening revelation, a confirmation of the unease she had felt from the beginning. He plays games, Jinxie, miss, he whispered, her gaze fixed on the swirling steam from her coffee cup. Be careful. Don't become another one of his pawns. Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken warnings. Jinxie looked at Miss He, at the sadness in her eyes, the weariness in her voice. And in that moment, she knew. She knew that she was standing at a crossroads, a point of no return. She could choose to play Mr. Gu's game, to become another piece in his intricate puzzle. Or she could choose to walk away, to forge her own path, to define her own destiny. The decision, she realized, would change everything. The muted hum of the city light seeped through the panoramic window, a blurred tapestry of gold and crimson against the indigo canvas of the night sky. Mr. Gu stood, his silhouette a sharp contrast against the urban glow, a glass of amber liquid cradled in his hand. He swirled the whiskey, the ice clinking softly, a counterpoint to the silence that hung heavy in the room. The scent of aged leather and expensive aftershave lingered in the air, a subtle reminder of the power that resided within these walls. The door clicked softly, and Miss He entered, her footsteps barely audible against the thick carpet. She paused, a fleeting hesitation in her movements, before closing the door behind her and moving towards him. He didn't turn, his gaze still fixed on the city lights as if searching for an answer within their chaotic dance. You knew this would happen, she said, her voice low, laced with a weariness that mirrored his own. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light before disappearing into the shadows of the glass. Did I? He murmured, the words lost in the vastness of the office. Did I orchestrate it? No. He thought, the denial tasting bitter on his tongue. But did I anticipate it? Perhaps. Nangong's resignation hadn't surprised him. Her fragility, her desperate clinging to control, had been evident from the start. Jinxie's arrival, unintentional as it may have been, had merely been the catalyst. Miss He moved closer, the faint perfume of lilies of the valley swirling around her. He finally turned, his eyes meeting hers, the unspoken questions hanging in the air between them. There was a shared history in that gaze, a complex tapestry of understanding and resentment, of affection and betrayal, woven over years of intertwined lives. This game you play, Gu, she continued, her voice taking on a sharper edge. It's dangerous. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Is it, he? Or is it simply fascinating? His gaze drifted back to the cityscape. Fascinating to see how people react, how they reveal their true selves under pressure. He watched the tiny cars crawling along the roads below, each one a world of its own, filled with hopes, dreams, and inevitable disappointments. Miss He sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. That girl, Jinxie, she's in over her head. And you've thrown her into the deep end, haven't you? Just like you always do. The unspoken accusation hung between them. She's more resilient than you think, he countered, his voice quiet but firm. He had seen the flicker of defiance in her eyes, the way she'd held her ground against Nangong's thinly veiled attacks. There's a fire in her, a strength that she doesn't even realize she possesses. And what about Nangong? Miss He pressed, her voice laced with a hint of pity. She's lost everything. A wave of something akin to guilt washed over him. He had anticipated Nangong's reaction, yet he hadn't intervened. Was it cruelty? Or simply indifference? He pushed the thought away, the discomfort settling like a stone in his gut. She made her choices, he said finally, his voice devoid of emotion. She chose to cling to her insecurities, to let them consume her. Miss He shook her head, a strand of dark hair falling across her cheek. You could have stopped it. He met her gaze, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Could I have? he asked, the question hanging in the air between them. Perhaps. He thought. But where's the challenge in that? He thrived on chaos, on the unpredictable nature of human interactions. It was a dangerous game, he knew, but it was a game he couldn't resist. What will you do now? Miss, he asked, her voice softer now, the edge of accusation replaced by a weary acceptance. He took another sip of his whiskey, the ice clinking against the glass. What will I do? He thought, the question echoing in the vast emptiness of the office. He would smooth things over, of course. He would ensure that Jinxie found her footing, that the R&D department continued to function, that the ripples of Nangong's departure eventually subsided. He would manipulate, he would charm, he would orchestrate events from behind the scenes, pulling the strings of his carefully constructed world. I'll take care of it, he said finally, his voice low and steady. The city lights shimmered beyond the window, a silent promise of the endless possibilities that lay ahead. The game, after all, was far from over. He felt a familiar thrill course through him, the anticipation of the next move, the next challenge. And in the silence that followed, the unspoken question lingered, who would be the next pawn in his game?